particular amongst fishing peoples. I think, like the rest of Brexit, as the real the impact of it actually feeds through and we find out exactly what it's going to mean, will turn a lot of people against Brexit and towards independence. I'm quite sure of that. And that will include people in the fishing communities. But I think the political parties and the Yes movement need to be able to reassure fishing communities around Scotland, and a lot of them are around the north of Scotland, the Highlands and Islands, which I represented as an MSP for 4 years, and then Skylochaber and Badenoch, which I represented as a constituency MSP for the SNP for 5 years as well. A lot of fishermen in these areas, and they will come over to us, but we need to be sure we're offering them security for the future in relation to fishing as well.
Can I ask you about your time in the Parliament then? Because I think one of the things that's worrying a lot of people in Scotland, even if they're not necessarily independent supporters at the moment, is that, you know, I don't know if you're familiar with Yes Minister, but the thing they described as salami tactics, slice by slice, they're trying to get rid of the Scottish Parliament. Do you think that's actually happening? They're just trying to weaken the foundations so that they finally got an excuse to get rid of it. Do you think that's the long-term strategy of Westminster at the moment?
Well, I think there will be a lot of folk in Whitehall, Westminster, who wish the Scottish Parliament had never been set up. I don't think there's any denying that. And you can see over recent years the so-called additional powers that we have got have been given very, very grudgingly. And in fact, the latest batch of powers are partial powers over taxation and so on, that I think are a bit of a trap, because if you're going to do a job, if you want to go and fix a car, if you're that way inclined, you need a full toolkit. You can't just take a hammer and a chisel and expect to do a good job on fixing the car or any other job for that matter. And what we've been given as a parliament is just maybe a quarter of the toolkit, and then we've been told, go and fix the whole thing. And that's a very, very difficult situation for the current SNP government to be in. And the whole Brexit thing, the so-called power grab, I think, that we are seeing, where they'll take powers back to London, but they're telling us, but don't worry, we'll then give them all back to you. Well, how many promises have we seen broken over decades? And it's one of the reasons why myself and others believe that Scotland needs to be independent with a full range of powers, so we can make all the decisions here in Scotland, including decisions about whether we go back into the EU if we're taken out by the UK, or whether we become a EEA or EFTA member or whatever. The fundamental thing, I think, for Christians for Independence is that we believe that independence is the only real way to get a good, socially just Scotland. And my reading of the Bible and the sayings of Jesus Christ clearly indicate to me that social justice and fairness and decency are at the heart of Christian faith. And if you actually look around you, if you look at what Christians are doing in society, and there's not much said about this, most of the stuff is to do with sexual issues and so on, but Christians in their communities get involved in credit unions and housing associations and youth groups like the Scouts and the Guides and the BBs and others. They man and woman the food banks, they get onto community councils, they do hospital visits. There's a huge proportion of the volunteers in our society who actually have a Christian faith. And I think that points to the fact that Christianity is very strong on social justice.
And with your experience in the Parliament, how did you find working in the Scottish Parliament was for social justice issues? You explained that you think that the Scottish Parliament's in a very difficult position, or the SNP government's in a very difficult position. But do you generally think that the work they do is positive and it's a more kind of functional Parliament compared to Westminster, where it's all sort of pomp and circumstance?
My experience really was over the 9 years from 2007, when the SNP were first of all a minority government and then a majority. So I never knew anything other than that. But the policies that the party tried to pursue, and to a great extent very successfully, were policies that were socially just. And you can see that now in how the party is setting up social services and so on, that there's a real agreement across the Scottish Parliament, even amongst opposition parties like Labour and the Lib Dems and so on, that social security and looking after people is something really worthwhile. And one of the things I can never get my head around is why the likes of the Labour Party don't endorse independence, and the clear knowledge that between the Labour and the SNP and the Greens at least, you would have a big majority for a social justice agenda and an independent Scotland. And I also believe that the Labour Party would benefit itself massively from adopting independence. And it's still my hope that they may do it, because when they do, then we will get a majority in the Scottish Parliament, a substantial majority in the Scottish Parliament, and we'll also get a majority in the next independence referendum with Labour backing it as well as the SNP. So that's my hope for the future, that they will see sense and they will actually endorse independence.
I hope so too. When would you like to see that next independence referendum? There's some people that want it now, quicker, before Brexit happens, or some people that want it after Brexit. Some people are telling Sturgeon, you've got to push, go now. And other people say, wait, until we've got a majority in the polls and a consistent majority. Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, well, Christians for Independence as such, we haven't debated, the timing of the next referendum. We all want one, and I personally, I'm the convener, but this is a personal view. I would hope that we keep our options open, because one of the things I've learned in my 50-odd years in politics as an activist and also as an MSP is that things can change very, very rapidly in politics. And you saw that with things like the Berlin Wall. Nobody was really expecting that to happen. You see that with some of the financial crashes. Something comes up and all of a sudden there's a shift. And also I believe that things build up like building behind a dam, the views of people. And then all of a sudden a dam breaks. And if you're in politics, you have to be ready to ride the logs down that dam. And you don't want to have closed off any doors. So it may well be that we have to wait until we see just with clarity where Brexit is actually going to take us. That could happen very quickly. They might cut and run, the Tories might cut and run, and we could be out of Europe and a decision in that in about next spring maybe. Or maybe they'll continue it and it could be up to 2019 or 20 or 21 with their interim periods and so on. But one thing I don't think the SNP or any other party or the Yes movement should do is say categorically we will not have an independence referendum before 21. I want it as soon as possible, but I want it when we can win it. I've been waiting 50-odd years already. I'm really disappointed we didn't win it in 2014. But, another year or 2 years, I can wait because I want it to happen. It's going to happen, but we need to be ready to go. So keep the doors open so that if something happens politically in the UK or whatever, we are ready to move and take advantage of it.
Just to change course a little bit about situations that are very fluid at the moment, what do you think about what's been going on in Catalonia recently?
Yeah, well, I believe very strongly that all people should have the right of self-determination, and that's the United Nations position as well, and I suppose ostensibly the European Union's position. Democracy must prevail. And the violence that was shown by the Guardia, who went in to stop the people in Catalonia from voting, was absolutely abhorrent. And it should have been condemned immediately by the European Union. And I think they didn't do themselves any favours by not coming out and condemning the violence right away. They didn't need to come out and support the independence or otherwise, but they should have condemned the violence, certainly. And the whole argument and the whole thing that's being reported in our media is that the Spanish authorities say that the referendum in Catalonia was illegal. Well, you know, laws are made by people. Majority governments can make laws about anything and it becomes a legal position. So something against it is then illegal. But they're made by people. The only laws that are really sacrosanct are the laws of God, in my view, and Jesus, which are above people. But there's a United Nations law and rules that state that all peoples have the right of self-determination. So I would have thought that that would have overruled any law that an individual state would apply. And yet the European Union and the various countries within it are all talking on about the illegality of the Catalonian position. And I think that's a real shame. And I think we in Scotland and the independence movement should strongly support the Catalonians and what they're trying to do.
Speaking of laws of God or laws of men, as I said, I'm not a religious person, but I don't think the listeners to this show would forgive me if I didn't bring this up, because it's something that I've, let's just say, made fun of on more than one occasion on the show. And that was that during the first independence referendum, the Reverend Alan McCall of the Free Presbyterian Church stating that Scottish independence would be a provocation of God. Now, I'm tempted to ask, firstly, how do you know? But to him, not to you there. But how does he know? But is that not quite an absurd position? And does Christians for Indy have any response to that?
Yeah, that Christians will hold a wide range of views. Even within Christians for Independence, there will be a wide range of views about a number of subjects. But what we do believe, a fundamental belief, is in Jesus Christ, who we believe was the Son of God and came to earth and, has saved us, from our badness, and we'll end up in heaven at the end of the day. And you will get lots of Christians who don't agree with independence and lots who do. And part of the job of Christians for Independence is to get the message across to people who have a Christian faith that it's okay to believe in independence. And there will be certain people and possibly even certain denominations that just are absolutely against independence for their own reasons. I don't believe that independence would be a provocation to God, but the Reverend Alan McCall is entitled to his view and his opinion. And I would happily, share a platform with him and debate that. And as Christians for Independence, we did that during the 2014 referendum. We had shows at public meetings all over Scotland where we raised the issues and invited folk to come along. Can I just give you a wee statistic, Michael? Mm-hmm. The number of people who attend church on a Sunday morning, although it has been dropping, is still way in excess of 400,000 people. Mm-hmm. Now, that's a huge chunk of the electorate in Scotland. And it's a chunk of the electorate where the majority voted against independence. So if we want to win our independence, if we could convince all the Christians, we would have walked it the last time. And one of the jobs of Christians for Independence is just to let people see that it's okay. It's to take the debate out into the Christian community and convince people that it's all right, and to counter the position taken by the Reverend Alan McCall that you just quoted. A huge number of Christians favour independence, but nothing like a majority yet. And we have to get all parts of our society, And as I say, with 400,000 people actually going to church on a Sunday, not people who claim